With compliance reporting, we want to answer two questions. We want to answer the question, is the network configured correctly? And we also want to know who has done what in our network. When we think about compliance reporting in NSO, we really think of NSO as the authoritative configuration of your network. So the configuration you have in NSO is really what should be on your network. If you have changes done to your network outside of NSO, it's hard to check for compliance compared to what you have in NSO. If we then think of NSO as the authoritative configuration of our network, the check of compliance is rather simple, since we only have to check that whatever we have in NSO is what we're running in our network. And when we run compliance reporting, we can have two different outcomes. Either we are compliant and we have no violations in our network, everything is as it should, or we are not compliant and we have violations. So in NSO, when we run compliance reporting, we base it around a number of different checks. So we have checks for devices, and we have checks for services, and we have some checks for historical changes. So the device checks starts off with checking that the devices that we have configured in NSO are compliant. Here we just want to see that the configuration that we have in our devices are actually correct and the same as what we have in NSO. So the check we have in NSO, we just base around the check sync action that we have for devices. So we make sure that whatever configuration we have in NSO is actually what we have on the device. And this, as said, will return that the device is either compliant or not compliant, that it has violations or no violations. This won't check that the configuration is correct, so it will just check that what we have in NSO is the same as what we have on the device. So if you think of the configuration as in NSO as the correct configuration, then yes, this will check that the configuration is correct. But if you want to do some other checks on your configuration on your device, you can utilize the device template check that we also have in compliance reporting. And here we check the device configuration against some predefined device template. So you create your device template, you add it to your compliance report, and when you run it, we will apply this template. And when we have applied the template to your device, we will produce a diff with any changes. So if there are any changes when you apply the device, then we know that yes, this device configuration doesn't correspond to what we have in our template, and we say that yeah, this device isn't compliant. So if the diff is empty, yeah, the device is compliant. If the diff is not empty, it's not compliant. And this check will only check whatever configuration you have in NSO, so it won't check the actual live configuration on a device. So if you want to make sure that you're running the correct configuration in the live device, you will have to combine this check with the previous device compliance check to check that whatever we have in NSO is correct or is in sync, and then that the configuration is correct. Furthermore, we have the concept of services in NSO, and of course you can check the compliance of a service as well. So here we want to answer the questions, has the service been undermined, and would a redeploy do anything when to the network? So similar to the device check, we use the check sync action. In this case, it won't just return that the device or the service is in sync or not, it will also return a diff with any changes that would be done to the network if you redeploy this service. And similar to the device template check, if the diff is empty, yeah, then we consider this service compliant, and if it isn't empty, then it's not compliant. Same as the device template check, this won't check the actual devices, the live devices. So you will have to combine this with the device compliance check to know that what you're running on your devices is actually correct. And you will have to run it for all the devices that your service touches. The last check we have is something we call historical changes, which in itself isn't really a check. This is more for informational purposes. So this will answer the second question I posed before, who has done what. So here we utilize the rollback files in NSO, so you will have to have them enabled. It will detail the changes that has been done to either a service or a device, and it will list who has done the changes and at what time and all the other information that you get with rollback files. And for this one, you will define a time span and when you run your report, and it will check the historical changes and the rollback files in this time span. So this won't say that the device or a service is compliant or not, it will just give you some information in your final report. So if we have a look at the model for the compliance reports, we have a list of named reports where you can say that you want to run some specific checks. So you have device checks, you have service checks, and you have template checks. And then you have a run action which you use to run the report, and there you can specify the time span which you want to run the historical changes for. And you have an out format where you can say what format you want the final report in. So you can have either an XML file, an HTML file, or a TXT file as output from your run. In the output, you will get the status. So you will say if there are any violations or not. Then you will get some information about how many devices and services you have run this compliance report for. And then you will get the location for the final report. This information will then be available in the operational data down here in the report results. So here you have the list of previously run reports. So you have the same data as you have in the output, and you have some more information about who ran the report and at what time and so on. So if we have a look at a small example, so I go into the NSO CLI, I create a service of type DNS, and I set some leaves on this service. I then create a compliance report, which I call services, and then I enable the service checks for all services. By adding this service check presence container, I say that I want to run all the checks that we have for services. If you want to disable some checks, you'll have to disable them manually. I commit this, and then I can use the run action on this report, and I say that I want the final report as a TXT file. As an output, I get the information that I have run this report for no devices and one service, and I also get the location of the report. If I then exit the CLI and look in the state directory, I see that we have generated one report. And if I open that report, it looks something like this. So you have some summary information about the report. So you will have the final result. There are no violations. You will have the information that we got in the output. You will have when it was produced and the time span and so on. Then you will have some information about the service checks that we run. So here we check the current out of sync status for the services, and there were no services that were found out of sync. Then we have the details section where we have the historical changes, where you can see that we have checked a number of rollback files, and you have all the information related to those rollback files. And then we have the historical changes for the services and devices in this report. So here it was one service, and this is what we changed. As we saw in the previous slide, I set the device and the attempt leaves, and that shows up in the details here. And then we have some more details. If we would have had services that were out of sync, we would get a diff of all the violations we had for that service. Yeah, so that's a short, quick summary of what compliance reporting is and how it works in NSO. And all of this was introduced by Mr. Tree here for almost 10 years ago, as you see here on the first commit. And since then, we haven't done a lot when it comes to compliance reporting. We haven't really touched it. We have fixed bugs and whatnot, but yeah, we haven't done a lot with it. That is today, until today, with the release of NSO 6.1. We have gone through the compliance reporting and updated it in a number of ways. This is a list of some of the things that we have done, and I will go through them one by one to give you some more information about what we have done. So the first thing we did was to look at compliance reporting and HA. So compliance reporting in itself is a read-only operation, really. But in the background, it used to use some read-write transactions, which made it made it not possible to run it on secondary nodes. So we have changed this. So we are utilizing read-only transactions, which should make it possible to run this on read-only nodes and secondary nodes. And this is nice because you can then offload your compliance reporting to nodes that aren't as loaded as your primary might be. The big caveat here is that we are not HA aware in the compliance reporting. So if you start generating reports on your secondary nodes, they will not be automatically synced to your primary nodes and vice versa. So if you generate a report on a secondary node, you will have to get that report on the secondary node. Yeah. The next thing that we had a look at is to change how we run the compliance reporting. So previously, the compliance reports were generated in memory. We built up an XML file that we then, from this XML file, generated either an HTML or a TXT file if you requested that out format. This meant that if you have large networks with a lot of devices and services that you had to check compliance for, it might mean that you end up in you could end up with a lot of memory usage, and you could even end up in out-of-memory issues if you have really large networks. For 6.1, we have changed this so that we, instead of generating the reports in memory, are now generating them on disk. So we are streaming the results back to disk and generating an intermediate file. From this intermediate file, we then generate the final report. So that we are using more disk I/O, but we will be using less memory for generating reports. And while doing this, we changed the intermediate format for the report. So now we are not generating an XML file. On disk, we are actually generating an SQLite file on disk. So when we are running the checks, we are streaming them down to an SQLite file on disk. This file will always be kept. So if you're generating any other format than SQLite file, you can from now on also just generate the SQLite file. But if you generate any other format, we will still keep the SQLite file. This means that this file is now usable by the user of the compliance reporting. So if you want to do something with the reporting, you don't have to parse an XML file anymore. You can instead use this SQLite file and run queries against the data in the report. This means that you can, for example, generate your own reports if you like to, or you could even merge the different report files and run queries over multiple report runs to get some historical data on your compliance reporting. Small example. I do the same thing as I did in the first example. We create a service, we create a report, and we run this report and say that we want the output as a TXT file. Nothing has changed here, so it looks the same. But then if we look in the report directory, we will see that we have generated two different files. So we'll have the TXT file, but we will also have a .db file, which is the SQLite file that is generated during the report run. Excuse me? If you don't specify the out format, it will by default produce an XML file. But you can say out format SQLite, and then it will produce just the SQLite file. Yeah. Yep.
Is this file, the SQLite file, always kept? Because I see it's like 20 times larger.
Yes, it's always kept.
You have to remove it if you don't want it.
Yeah, you have to remove it if you don't want it. Before 6.1, we used to generate an XML file. And from this XML file is what we showed northbound. We use these XML files, so there's nothing stored in CDB in NSO for the reports. So we based all the northbound interfaces when it comes to compliance reporting, the results. We based on these XML files. But now we base them on the SQLite file. So if you remove them, you won't see the report in the operational data and underneath compliance there. So that you need to be aware of. So you can still remove it, but you won't be able to get it from the northbound interface then.
Is it per run? You create
Yeah. We create one per run, yes.
If you have large reports, you have to keep removing those files.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So this file, we can then have a look at it. So if we use the SQLite 3 command that is included in the SQLite distribution and open this file, then we can run, for example, the tables command, and we can see that we have a bunch of different tables here. So we have, for example, a report table where we have all the reports in this file, and then we have separate tables for the devices that we have checked, the services that we have checked, the rollback files, and so on. If we then have a look at the report table, we have one row per report in this file. So by default, it will only be one row in each file, but it's made like this, so it should be possible to merge these files if we want to run like historical queries and stuff. And here you have all the information about the report that has been run. So you see when it's been run, what the name is, and who ran it, and what the final outcome was. So this is a Boolean, but stored as an integer in the SQLite database. And then we can have a look at the service table for this specific report, and we see that we checked one service, it was in sync, and we have some historical changes for this service. So if we would do the same thing, but for the device table, we wouldn't get any rows because we didn't check any services in this report. And then we can also check the rollback file table, and we see with that we have the rollback files that we have checked in this for this report. And you have a bunch of other information related to the templates and whatnot, so you can get all the information that we use to generate the final report. Yes. No, there are like UI tools for it as well. Yeah, so there are multiple. This is just for as an example. So there are other tools to get at this data if you want it. Yeah, so this is what you have, and it should make it possible to generate your own reports, as said, or do like historical queries if you merge these files and whatnot. The next thing we have done is that we have tried to speed up the report generation as well. Previously, all the checks in compliance reporting were run sequentially. Now we are running them in parallel. And yeah, might be useful if you run this on secondary nodes where you have more resources available to you when you're running compliance reporting. So these are more of internal, maybe not as user-facing features. The next two things I'm going to show you are a bit more user-facing and might be useful for doing new things when it comes to compliance reporting. So the first thing we have introduced is something we call compliance templates. They work similar to device templates, but device templates are really a hack where device templates are really made for applying configuration. They aren't really made for checking that configuration is correct. Compliance templates are, on the other hand, not made for applying configuration. They are made for checking configuration. So all the values you have in a compliance template won't be treated as a string as they are in a device template. They will instead be treated as regular expressions. And you will have a check action on your compliance template, which you can, where you can specify that you want to check a certain device configuration. And it will then go through your device configuration and match all the values you have in there against the regular expressions you have in your compliance templates. Similar to device templates, you also have variables and functionality for doing upgrades when you update your nets and so on. So what we have added to the model is this new list of named templates. So they look similar to device templates, where you have some config per NED. The big difference is that you have a check action, where you specify the devices you want to check, and you specify some variables, and then you get some output from this action. So here you see that you have a result, which will be either that you have violations or no violations, and then there will be a diff, which will list all the violations that you have in your device configuration. So if you don't have any violations, this diff will be empty, but if you have violations, it should detail all the violations you have. Furthermore, we have another action down here, create template, where you can create a compliance template from a device template. Here you need to be a bit careful, because when you are creating the compliance template, we won't change anything in the values of your device template. So if you have values that are considered valid regular expressions, they will now be treated as regular expressions, and it might lead to unexpected outcomes if you're not careful. So a short example of this as well. So here I create a compliance template. I call it test. For the netconf router 1.0, I say that I want to have interfaces that have any name. I want to have a unit underneath these interfaces that has the key 1, 2, or 3. And I want a IPv4 address that is 192.168.1.any character. I can then add this template to our compliance report. So here I say that I want to do a device check with this template. I commit this, and then I can run this compliance template. So if I use the check action, and I say that I want to check the EX0 device, I will get this output here. So in this case, we have violations. And here you have the diff, which lists all the violations you have in your device. So in this case, we have an interface, EJ0, and there is no violation there, since the name could be anything. But then we have 3 different units with 3 different violations. So in the first case, you have unit 0 that doesn't match the key 1, 2, or 3. So the whole unit will be considered a violation and will be shown in the diff. For the second unit, the key is correct. It's a 2, but we are missing the IPv4 address. For unit 3, the key is correct or is valid, but we're missing the IPv4 address, but instead we have an IPv6 address. So if I would be running the compliance template now, I would get the same information that I have here, I would get in my final report. The device would be considered non-compliant, and it would show the big diff you have here in the final report. Yes, that's compliance templates. Short about those. The last feature we have done is something we call strict mode. So here, when you use the template functionality in your compliance report, it will check just the configuration you have in your template. But with strict mode, we will check that whatever configuration you have in your templates is the only configuration that should be present on your device. So if you have any extra configuration on your device that you haven't specified in your template, that would be considered a violation, and the final report will say that you have a violation for this device. Yeah, and those, yeah. No, it's for the whole configuration. So you say that you have to specify everything that is in your device configuration. You need to specify in your template, because otherwise you will have a violation. Yeah. So there's no possibility to say for just parts of the device configuration, right? As of now. Yeah.
Actually, I had a question that is partly answered in the third point. Device or compliance templates.
Yes.
Only config in which template? I'm not clear.
So this strict mode you can enable for both device and compliance templates. So it will work for both of them. So when you run the check action for a compliance template, it will check all the configuration you have in the device. But if there is any configuration on your device that you haven't specified in your template, then that would be considered a violation. And similar to device templates, when you apply the configuration, if there is any configuration that you haven't specified in your device template, when we are applying it, it will show up in the diff, and it will be considered a violation.
How about service templates?
No, we haven't. Nothing there. We haven't. This is just for compliance reporting, so it's just for the compliance reports in when you use them in compliance reporting, or the templates when you use them in compliance reporting. Yes. No, not as of now. Right now, it's the whole configuration or nothing. Yes. Yeah, that's the things we have done for 6.1. Of course, we have done some stuff, more internal stuff as well, and there are a bunch of stuff that we should probably do in the future as well. I know for sure that we are working on a web UI for all of this, to make it possible to create reports, run reports, and so on in NSO. As said, when I talked about the HA part of compliance reporting, we are not syncing reports, and that's probably something that we should have a look at to support HA in compliance reporting. Next thing, for all the diffs that we have in compliance reporting, we are currently generating them as CLI diffs, and here it might be useful to generate them in other formats that are better suited for different use cases. And there are probably more checks that we can do in compliance reportings. I've heard talks about using service deep check sync, but there might be other stuff as well that we should add to compliance reporting. And yeah, if you have any suggestions or what you want to see, yeah, please come talk to us or let us know what you want to see in compliance reporting, what you're missing. I've already heard one thing, parts that use strict mode for parts of the configuration. Excuse me? No, we haven't discussed it, but it's definitely something that we should probably have a look at. I've seen tickets or heard talks about it, but there's nothing that we have discussed really. No, we haven't looked at that, but that's definitely something that we should look at, I guess, and see. It might be interesting, of course, to see. I mean, if you're using commit queues, it's yeah.
Based on our observation, the performance about generating a compliance ticket was quite poor.
Yep.
Yeah, and quite costly actually.
Yep.
And would you please offer some key indicator like after 6.1, how fast
Uh, I've seen numbers, but I wouldn't take them which much. No, it's I wouldn't trust them that much if I say it like that. Um, uh, Compliance reporting is hard. I mean, we have to check old like logs and stuff and so whatnot, and that's probably why it's slow. But I mean, running stuff in parallel, and we have removed some checks and so on, and changed them and so on. So it should be a bit faster, but I can't tell you really. We haven't run those performance checks. So yes, from now we will utilize our core. So of course it will be faster, but still we will have more disk I/O than before as well. So previously we used the memory instead, but now we'll use disk instead. So I mean, it's a give and take situation as well. So yeah, that's all I had. I'm on the questions already. So
The compliance template
yeah,
was using the CLI syntax.
yeah,
Is it possible to use XML?
no. So they work similar or yeah, of course, if you create your own XML and use like load config or something, then you can do it. But I mean, but we don't have something similar to the service templates or the config templates.
Okay.
So it's similar to device templates.
So then, in practice, if you want to use strict mode with the compliance template, you would have to sort of have the template having all the schema tags, and then using the don't star
Yeah.
sort of cover the things we don't want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And another question on the rollback check.
Yep.
What is that really doing?
It's giving you more, as said, it's more answering the question of what has been done in your system. So you want to see who has done changes to this service or this device, and what changes have we done in this time span. So it's more for like informational purposes.
So it's based on like given a time span.
Yeah.
You look for.
Yeah, we'll look at the rollback files for that time span and see what changes has been done for this service or this device. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Compliance reporting has to look at some heavy data as well. Yeah.
Is there a parallelism in that, like you provide rollback
Uh,
files?
in some sense, yes, we are running since we're running the checks in parallel. We are running them in parallel. Yes. So there are some parallelism there. Yes, of course, but we still need to like read up the rollback files and whatnot, and that you can't really do in parallel. So yeah, right now.
The regular expression, I've seen it, you've applied it in the leaf context. Can I use dot star, say, at a container and say, I don't care,
You,
I don't care, I don't care.
no, not as of now. No. So this is just for like leaves and lists and whatnot. So of course that's one way that you could probably have the strict mode for parts of your configuration if you wanted, but yeah, then we have to. Any other questions?
Based on the services that are configured, could you also do, or is there any ideas in the future for checking configuration missing ref counts or incorrect ref counts in regards to, for example, services and the manual change or some configuration when we sync the device from the beginning?
I guess it's possible, but there's nothing we have talked about or discussed or so. But yeah, give us the idea or let us know what you see, and we'll have a look at it. I would say if it's possible or not. Yeah, I'm right on time. Thank you very much.